am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose rapture.
It is Saturday, December 6th, and we are making a podcast about Peter Thiel. I am joined today by Thomas Vanek and Richard Senex.
Howdy.
And we are going to be examining the life of a guy who once hatched a 10-year-long conspiracy to destroy a major media outlet and succeeded. So it's really thrilling to talk shit about a guy who is legendary for suing journalists. But I feel that we should give it the old college try.
Yeah, well, Will's #1 United States bad boy. Okay, he's a rebel, a man who goes against the grain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I can't believe attacking billionaires. Who does that? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like punching down.
It does really.
I feel
it
bad
almost
for him.
feels wrong.
I do.
Oh yeah.
I feel bad for Peter Thiel. You know, his whole life reminds me of this thing that Henry Kissinger said about Richard Nixon when Richard Nixon was in the grips of a terrible, paranoid, psychotic break in like 72 and 73 when he was drinking himself into a frenzy and, you know, giving crazy orders to be executed in Vietnam and freaking out about Watergate.
You see, the Bible makes a distinction, Mr. President, between two groups of Jews. One is called the synagogue of Satan. There's two different kinds. There are those people in the latter days that's called the remnant of God's people, which will be Jewish people. And then there's the synagogue of Satan, and nearly all of your religious deceptions in the latter days, what the Bible speaks latter days to be 1,000 years, what they call the synagogue of Satan. In other words, they are energized by a supernatural power called the devil. This is what the Bible teaches. Whether you believe it or don't believe it, this is the biblical teaching. This is what I believe. And I believe that they have a strange brilliance about them. They're smart, and they are energized, in my judgment, by a supernatural power.
Well, also they do something else. They're not smart.
And you see, of course, Hitler didn't. They had a stranglehold on Germany, on the banking of Germany, on everything in Germany, and the media. They had the whole thing, you see, but he went about it wrong. But this stranglehold has got to be broken, or this country is going to go down the drain. Yes, sir.
I can't ever say it, but I believe it.
Nobody hit it elected the second time. We might be able to do something.
And at one point, somebody brought up Nixon to Kissinger and his crazy behavior, and Kissinger said, "Can you imagine who this man could have been if somebody would have loved him?" And
Wow.
that is exactly what I see in the life of Peter Thiel. With his upbringing, with his family, he is the living truth of be careful who you call ugly in middle school. Yeah,
he kind of reminds me of the episode we did on Lord Byron, where when I read about his early life, which I only did a little bit, his audience, Will is mostly going to be taking the lead on this one. Thomas and I are going to be asking him questions as we move forward. But he did have a really troubled childhood, at least mentally. And it's one of those instances where, much like Lord Byron, I feel really bad for the child, Peter Thiel, or Thiel. I don't really feel bad for the adult who he ended up growing up to be.
Yeah, having a tough childhood doesn't give you permission to do major damage to other people's lives. But
well, Will, why don't we just get this thing? Why don't we just smash the champagne glass on this ship and get it moving? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the founding of Palantir around 2003, who founded it, and what kind of led to its creation?
Sure. So Palantir, as Richard just said, is founded in 2003. And the reason why it is created is for two reasons. Number one, after 9/11, Peter Thiel analyzed the intelligence handoff that didn't occur between the CIA, who was tracking foreign Islamic radicals and watching them, for example, cross the Canadian border into the United States. And they were supposed to let the FBI know and didn't. And so that is one of the reasons why, the intelligence handoff thesis of 9/11 is that the reason that 9/11 was not prevented was because the CIA had not fully briefed the FBI. This is sort of true, and was the result of much interdepartmental warfare between the CIA and the FBI, because both of those groups were very heavily under the microscope. George Tenet's CIA and Mueller's FBI. So they were both trying to prove that the other guy had fucked up. And to a certain extent, this is kind of the case. But Peter Thiel looked at this scenario and he said, you know what would have prevented 9/11? Software. If we had just had the right database, the CIA could have easily let the FBI know that such and such plane hijackers were living, as they actually were, in an apartment complex in Lemon Grove, a neighborhood that is 20 minutes or so from where I and Richard grew up, which is where 9/11 was planned. So they were doing that, by the way, in the safe house of an FBI informant, or in the private residence of a guy who was an FBI informant. So the intelligence failures were pretty spectacular. And Peter Thiel's read was that if these organizations were just technologically enabled to talk to each other, then you could create database software that would prevent terrorism. And this is all very naive and massively far-fetched. Saying that 9/11 happened because of a failed intelligence handoff is sort of like saying the Kennedy assassination happened because the Secret Service failed to protect him. It's like, well, that may be true in a causal sense, but that is not why it happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, and notoriously, too, I mean, when you have competing agencies, it's like, to some extent, no amount of technological proficiency is going to, to get two testosterone fucking drunk military intelligence types to say, you know what? Now that we're enabled to work together, why don't we just do it? Why don't we just hold hands and sing Kumbaya while we, drone strike weddings in the Middle East or whatever? Like, no, I think that's incredibly naive and misguided in the strict sense of missing the point of why these communication failures happened, right? I mean, that's my point.
Yeah, well, Peter Thiel definitely fits, and Alex Karp to an extent too. They both kind of fit into the tech bro archetype of somebody who is sincerely pretty genius when it comes to their very specific skill set: software development, information collection, and venture capitalism, but they are very, very, very confused when it comes to understanding and relating to other human beings and what's better for them. Interestingly enough, Alex Karp is not an idiot. He has degrees in philosophy, and he's pretty well read, but for some reason the real implications and meaning of what he reads doesn't seem to stick all that well. It's like he reads it and understands it and says, oh, okay, and then moves on and does the opposite. For example, he's obsessed with the Hegelian dialect. He brings that up very often. But I wanted to say something, Will. It's interesting, speaking of his lack of understanding of people, the reason why Peter Thiel, or at least one of the reasons why Peter Thiel got the idea that he could use software for this, was because of his experiences with PayPal. So for the audience, Peter Thiel was he might have been the only, I don't remember, but he's one of the founding members of PayPal. And something that made PayPal so insanely successful for a while was that they had an extremely good algorithm for fraud prevention. And he started to see that and started to think that he wanted to extrapolate that into society, because he has this, much like Alex Karp, this kind of delusion of grandeur and this vision for the future where Silicon Valley and the United States military have a much, much, much closer relationship. In fact, I believe it was Alex Karp who compared, and I'm almost done, who compared our next steps into AI as the second Manhattan Project. And he takes it that seriously, because in his mind, he views the United States, strangely enough, as intrinsically more ethical than other nations. And so he thinks that it's kind of our responsibility to develop these technologies before anybody else does. Now, Thomas, you had something to say?
Well, I just wanted to say, Richard, I think you raised an excellent point, but unfortunately I didn't hear any of it for the simple fact that you said Silicon Valley is
Silicon,
completely...
who gives a shit, you
know
dingus?
who gives a shit? Nerds on the internet. We're going to get nasty grams. Yeah, no, Richard, you did not spend enough time in the spice mines, okay? That's all I'm saying.
True.
You've got to learn your lesson. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
put my jumpsuit back on.
Go back to your gay little CH for a couple years. Come back when you can present information that won't get us flack.
I'm cutting this. Thomas, did you have an actual point
No,
besides pedantically chastising Richard?
No, pedantically chastising Richard is one of my great joys in life.
Okay, so back to 2003. Back
on.
to 2003. So Palantir is formed in response to, number one, this perceived need in the intelligence community for database software so that the CIA, could have told the FBI. The irony here is that what the FBI alleges is that the CIA deliberately did not tell them, most likely because the CIA was engaged in serious ass covering about, at best, a rogue asset, and at worst, having foreknowledge of the 9/11 attacks and choosing to do nothing, which, beyond the scope of this podcast. But regardless, so there's this need to create government database software, and there's the need to spy on people. The spying on people part came out of the Bush administration. It came out of Dick Cheney and, the various legal goblins at the Office of Legal Counsel, like John Yoo, or Bush's lawyer, what was his name? Alberto Gonzalez, but most of all Cheney and his personal lawyer, David Addington. They hatched a crusade to create what would eventually be the SolarWinds project, which was a sweeping NSA dragnet that aimed at surveilling everybody. Now, one of the early attempts to start up the program was something called the Total Information Awareness Project. And, that's a pretty ominous sounding title. And to make matters worse, the guy who was in charge of the Total Information Awareness Project was John Poindexter. Now, John Poindexter was one of the central figures in the Iran-Contra scandal. He had been convicted and then, I think, pardoned immediately after, and had somehow managed to scrape the slime of Iran-Contra, which, again, we don't have time to talk about, but, Iran-Contra was basically the most illegal thing that ever happened. I mean, just violating every possible law, domestically, internationally, bribery, funding terrorist armies, arranging illegal arms transfers, apartheid South Africa, Israel, Iran, a bunch of brutal fascist paramilitaries in Nicaragua, the Contras themselves. So Poindexter had all of that splashed on him, and they said, well, let's put him in charge of the nation's spying program. And Congress freaked out, and they were too scared, and they said, we're not going to fund this. And so the reason why Palantir was created was because Peter Thiel was already having lots of conversations with Homeland Security types and various deep members of the neocon administration about, what if we had this data thing? And then when Congress failed to fund it, they said, how about we take the Total Information Awareness Project and we create a government subcontractor to carry it out? That way it's a lot less overseen by Congress.
Is that In-Q-Tel?
No, so In-Q-Tel is a venture capital fund that is basically ran by the CIA. It's like if you have a new recipe for nerve gas or something, you can get funding through In-Q-Tel. Or if you've developed a piece of software that, like Pegasus, can hack into people's phones, I think the CIA might have some money for you. They do it through their venture arm, In-Q-Tel.
It's a big step up for the CIA from, just funding shitty little journalist outputs in the 60s or whatever, right?
That's true.
Why simply fund, anti-communist intellectuals when you could just literally fund the, military-industrial complex as such? I mean, I think it's a great call for the taxpayer, right? Cut out the ideological middleman and just give the Warhawks money. Why not?
It's way smarter, but it's way less fun. I think we talked about this on Hunter S. Thompson, so I won't go too far into it. I miss Looney Tunes CIA so much. It's so much fun.
We're into loser CIA stuff by the time the 21st century rolls around. I started reading, so I think his name's Tom Weiner, and he wrote 2 books about the
really
CIA.
Quickly.
Oh my God, yes.
Poindexter and Weiner. Move on.
Yes.
Continue.
Agreed. Completely. It's out of our brains now. We can continue.
Okay, thank you.
Tom Weiner wrote 2 books about the CIA. The first was called Legacy of Ashes, and it's super long, and it covers the CIA from 1945 to, 9/11. And then everybody was like, okay, but what about the CIA now? And so he wrote a book that came out a year or 2 ago called The Mission, the CIA in the 21st Century. And so far, I haven't finished the book, but so far the impression that I have is these are a bunch of has-been bureaucrats relative to the skullduggery of, Richard Bissell or Alan Dulles or Sidney Gottlieb, for fuck's sake, with MK Ultra. These guys are...
Well, it's more mundane evil now, right? I mean, everyone loves... Well, it's like people love reading about supervillains, Darth Vader types, right? Who just execute these unbelievably insidious and evil and interesting plans. But then when you get down to it, and it turns out that the evil organization is like guys who are on pay scale E15 or whatever, right? It's like, well, that's a lot less. It feels less interesting, though arguably it's more realistic and far more impactful.
Yeah. Well, to bounce off of that, Will, for the benefit of our beautiful, wonderful audience, could you give us a little bit of a bio on Peter Thiel and Alex Karp and how they ended up linking together?
Yeah, sure. I'll try and keep it brief. So we'll start with Thiel. So Peter Thiel, he's born in Germany. His father, Klaus, is a mine engineer. And Peter Thiel is forced to move with his family 15 times or something during his childhood. So he has this socially very jagged existence where he's just getting uprooted all the time, moved from place to place. But the majority of his early adolescence, say, I don't have the exact thing in front of me, but roughly from the age of 8 to 13, he lives in apartheid South Africa. And his dad is on contract there to help construct an open pit uranium mine. And this is some pretty hardcore shit. For starters, an open pit mine is basically an ecological disaster in progress. Secondly, mining for uranium is extremely dangerous. And the workers, the people actually down there digging, not the engineers who are sitting on top of the mine, but the people actually down there digging, were exposed to, radioactive isotopes and so forth and suffered health damage. And by the way, whenever I talk about Peter Thiel's life, this is all coming from the book The Contrarian by Max Chafkin, which I strongly recommend. It's a very good book. It's an unauthorized biography, and it's very thorough and very well written. Anyway, so Thiel, he grows up in this family that is very cold, very stiff, and moves around a lot. And eventually, he ends up in Foster City, California, basically in early high school age. And while he's growing up here, he develops this reputation among the other children who knew him as having kind of a fuck you world attitude. a guy that didn't have many friends, but was obsessed with Lord of the Rings, was obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons, and especially with being a DM, and someone that had no interest in girls for reasons that'll become apparent later. And so, but nonetheless, he was someone who seemed angry and distant, someone who was very smart. Peter Thiel, this is one of his Bond supervillain qualities, but Peter Thiel is a very strong chess player and was a very competitive tournament competitive chess player as a young man as well. So he's this brainy kid. He's forced to move around a lot. He doesn't have many friends. He takes on kind of a social outcast persona. He gets very into games like chess. He gets very into fantasy like Lord of the Rings, and Dungeons and Dragons and science fiction. So anyway, so he goes off to college, and eventually I think he does his undergrad at Stanford, and then he attends Stanford Law. And while he's at Stanford, he starts a newspaper called the Stanford Review. And the Stanford Review is like Milo Yiannopoulos sort of right-wing troll stuff. It's about screaming slurs in public. Like there's this guy who was part of the Stanford Review called Keith Rebois, who had a multi-year university discipline thing happen to him because he was literally like screaming the F slur outside of people's dorms and so on. And the paper wrote a bunch of articles about how affirmative action was bad, about race science,
So they took the Burger King airplane guy's approach to politics.
Yeah, reading about what happened with this chapter has proved to me that all of this like quote unquote campus controversy shit, this exact debate, like point by point, goes all the way back to the 1990s. I mean, we have been doing this for 30 years now. There is nothing new about any of this. And so they took the position that like Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Milo Yiannopoulos of their time would take. So he graduates from Stanford Law School, which he apparently hates, and he immediately gets a job at Sullivan and Cromwell. And that's like a major white shoe law firm that is actually famous for being connected to the CIA. And he ultimately decides that Sullivan and Cromwell isn't that fun. And so he starts a hedge fund called Clarium Capital. And this is where like economic privilege enters the story for Thiel, because this is a small loan of $1 million moment for him. He goes around to his friends and family and says, I was able to raise just a tiny amount of money, just a little over $1 million. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. So you were basically gifted $1 million to manage by, the people you knew. And so you turned that into a hedge fund. He immediately, in his first year of trading, loses half of it on Forex speculation. He makes a bad bet about foreign currencies and loses half of his Clarium Capital money. So he's gone from $1 million to 500,000 or so. And then he decides that, well, at this point, responsible investing will not recoup my losses for, 10 years. So I have to throw another Hail Mary. And so he throws half of his remaining half. He throws $250,000 at this guy who had some app.com bubble stupid idea, and he throws $250,000 at this guy, and that guy squanders it also within a year. So it's gone. And so now he's down to $250,000. He's lost 75% of his first round of investment.
God,
his first round of investment.
Don't you love the efficiency of venture capitalism, Will?
Yeah, legendary business genius Peter Thiel. A big part of this will be poking holes in the myth that Peter Thiel is some kind of money god. What's actually amazing about Peter Thiel and Alex Karp is how long their failures were subsidized by people that had money to spend. Because, like Palantir, for instance, did not post a net profit quarter for 17 years.
Yeah, I read about that.
I mean, fucking think about that.
Peter Thiel almost entirely, I think he threw, when they started, $30 million into it. Meanwhile, InQtel, I'm sorry, only put like 1 or 2 million. I get the feeling they did not have a lot of confidence in Peter Thiel at first, or Alex Karp.
Yeah, they didn't. So, but they were hedging with them actually, quite a lot. So with Thiel anyway, so now he's down to a quarter of the small loan of $1 million that he was given, and he's despondent. And the guy that he had just funded, who I don't remember his name. Again, you can read the Chafkin book if you want the details. But the guy who flamed out on him said, well, I know it didn't work out with me, but you should really meet this other guy. And the other guy that he introduces Thiel to really is like a computer genius. He is an Eastern European immigrant who could not afford a computer, and so he wrote his first 100 programs like with a pencil and paper by reading, programming books from the 80s and so on.
Holy shit.
So this is the guy that ultimately builds the architecture of PayPal. And builds what will become PayPal's big export, which is this fraud detection thing that you were talking about, Richard. And the idea that by analyzing large amounts of network traffic for anomalies, they can stop fraud and find criminals. And so the guy who makes all of that stuff possible, who is actually, here's a fun fact, I forget his name, he invented the CAPTCHA as the fraud detection thing. So
that guy.
He invented clicking on fire hydrants to prove that you're a person. So
are we going to talk about every fucking scumbag on the planet in this episode? Good Lord.
Audience, think of every fire hydrant that you have ever clicked and know that Peter Thiel funded the mind that produced that. Yeah. Click all the motorcycles. Yeah. And then you're looking at one of the squares like, okay, there's like a little bit of the bumper. Does it count or not?
There's like 5 inches of that motorcycle's license plate in the corner.
Yeah. So, okay, just to abbreviate, so he co-founds PayPal with this guy, and there's Elon Musk is at the same time working on a payment platform called X.com. What's fascinating, if you read Chafkin's book, is that it talks about Elon's original vision for X.com, and it's exactly what he's doing now. He was not just trying to make a payment processor. He was trying to make a closed ecosystem.
The everything app?
The everything app, yes, where people would put money into X.com, which would be like a digital wallet. But then how do you keep that money in X.com? Well, you sell them a website, you sell them email, you sell them content, you sell them, whatever. So anyway, they merge. Long story short, those two efforts, PayPal and X.com, they merge. There are also other payment processors at the time. And there's a shit fit between the two of them. Peter Thiel leads a corporate coup d'etat when Elon Musk is on vacation. My reaction to hearing both of them is that Peter Thiel lost interest in the company. He thought eBay was boring. He wanted to do seasteading. He wanted to make countries in the middle of the ocean, and nonetheless, Elon Musk was such an obstinate executive and such a pain in the ass that the board basically demanded that Peter Thiel come back and steal the company from him, which he did. He waited until Elon was on vacation, and then he started pressuring everybody with voting power to remove him, which is what happened. They sell the company to eBay. eBay acquires them, and then the rest is history. It's $1.5 billion. It's a shitload of money. Thiel is now cemented. He's rich, and so at this point he has freedom of operation, and he makes the first outside investment in Facebook. He gives $500,000 to Mark Zuckerberg, not for Facebook.com as we know it now, of a social media site where, your grandma posts pictures of whatever, the pie she just baked, and, far-right racist AIs post an endless deluge of, Trump riding on top of a tank while a bald eagle with a lightning bolt behind it, screams in the background. No, what Mark Zuckerberg sold Peter Thiel in that meeting, the meeting that you see in the movie The Social Network, is an app that ranks the hotness of college undergraduate girls. And that's what Peter Thiel looked at and said, you know what? This kid's got a genius for human nature. And he gave him $500,000. And yeah, so that's kind of the beginning of Peter Thiel. That gets us at least up to the founding of Palantir. The more interesting shit happens later.
So I have a question that both you, Will, and you, Thomas, I think, would have a perspective on. So I've never read Hegel because I'm not a nerd. I'm a jackhammer. I'm an alpha male. I don't do stuff like that. But I understand that both of you have. And I read that both Thiel and Karp, they said that when it comes to like opposition and when it comes to fighting opposing businesses, they utilize the Hegelian dialectic. Do you have an opinion on, well then Thomas, you can start. Do you have an opinion on what they're talking about when they say that?
Well, I think the surface level analysis, which is probably true, is that it makes them sound very smart. I mean, obviously, Peter Thiel he got a degree in philosophy from Stanford, right? He studied it at the very least, right? And it's one of those things where when you talk about the Hegelian dialectic, it's essentially, you have your thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? And I mean, I won't explain the minutiae of Hegel's dialectic because that would take a long time. But no, I mean, in terms of how these, libertarian technocrat, venture capitalist types utilize that language, it really comes down to stuff like buy out your opposition and incorporate them into what you're doing, right? Like, see, you create something that is a reaction to the trends of the time and what your prediction of the times. I mean, this is kind of how it ties into like the founding of Palantir. I'm sure Will might have a different take on this, but the reality, this is kind of how I see it and how they use this rhetoric to justify their actions, if you will. But like to say, okay, here's the thesis is 9/11 occurs due to a lack of communication between the CIA and the FBI, right? That's the thesis. You've got, then they say, okay, well, what's the antithesis of that is the capacity for increased communication between government agencies. That's the polar dialectical opposite. The synthesis of that is sell it to the government, right? And so we've taken this existing problem, made the exact opposite, and then sold it to the government, right? Or, there's a bunch of ways to analyze it. And honestly, I haven't done nearly as much research on this exact topic and what they actually mean when they say that. But that's just sort of my instinctual answer on that sort of thing. But Will, do you have anything more insightful to say than I do, which is very likely?
Well, sure. So, I mean, I'm not a Hegel guy. I've read a little bit of elements of philosophy of right, but if you're in the philosophy world, like you've heard of phenomenology of spirit, and you've heard of Hegel's dialectic, and you've probably seen memes or heard lines of thought in the history of philosophy that Hegel is somehow responsible for both communism and fascism, which is kind of right. And so there was this thing after Hegel died, a kind of schism within the different camps, and it split into the left Hegelians, most famously Karl Marx, and the right Hegelians, who were much more interested in the power of the state. And so this kind of split in interpretation happens with Hegel, where the left Hegelians, the Marxists, they focus on reinterpreting Hegel to be not just about the dialectical progress of ideas, or the dialectical progress of consciousness or the spirit, but actually the dialectical progression of material reality, making a living, having a job, the production of commodities, and so forth. Whereas, the right Hegelians are much more interested in expanding the power of the state and making the state a much more absolute entity. And that's Curtis Yarvin, for example, the sort of neo-Hobbesian type people. Leo Strauss and the esoteric Platonists are part of this tradition, because Plato in the Republic was interested in creating an apartheid society in which people were fed a noble lie that led them to believe that some people were born superior enough that they would have unquestionable authority to rule their lives. This is a very popular line of thought with fascists. So, yes, Thomas.
Well, and that a lot of that comes from specifically some of the two. I mean, these are the books that I own of Hegel. You've got two works. You have the Philosophy of History, and you have the Phenomenology of Spirit. Right. So the Philosophy of History, one of the things that it sort of revolves around is this concept that the state, as such, capital S state, is the ultimate expression of human spirit, right? Like the state as a ruling body and as an expression of the will of the people is sort of the pivot upon which human activity revolves around. Now, Hegel, it's sort of interesting because that's a pretty popular reading amongst right wing, like you said, right Hegelians, or old Hegelians as they were called at the time. It's not, and it also led to Hegel getting a lot of criticism, specifically calling him like a monarchist, supporting the Kaiser and that sort of thing. But it's not entirely. I personally think that interpretation of Hegel is inaccurate in the sense of the state as like this any specific state. The state, I think, in Hegel, the Philosophy of Spirit, is more akin to this sort of idealized, like more of a Platonic ideal state, not Platonic. The point is not a Platonic republic, but a more idealized formation. And this is what, and he does elaborate on that a little bit in Phenomenology of Spirit, right? But you're definitely, but it is a common interpretation amongst the people who read him that way, is that, yeah, absolutely. We should expand the powers that be, right? You should expand the state as an organ of expression and that sort of thing. But the Phenomenology of Spirit sort of deviates a fair bit from that. I mean, obviously it's very pro-Christian in certain portions of it too. Christianity, according to Hegel, of course, is the most supreme idealistic form of religion that's ever been invented. Say what you will about that one. But yeah, that's where, those are the sort of ideas that people like Karl Marx and Engels and the new Hegelians sort of drew their ideas upon. I mean, it's the basis for dialectical materialism, the scientific study of history. I mean, those are some key concepts that really, like, especially with dialectical materialism, I think, right? It's like the dialectical materialism posits that you can specifically predict the material outcomes of historic events based on the preconditions, the material preconditions. Like, that's why they call it the science of history, right? And that's sort of the entire conceit of Marxist philosophical and sociopolitical analysis, right? Now, how much of all of this stuff people like Peter Thiel and the types who proclaim that they're influenced by Hegel's dialectic, I mean, how much of their notion of dialectical materialism is, you know what I mean?
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because I've been trying to, as you've been talking about this, I've been trying to use that information to fill in the gaps in the personality of Alex Karp and Peter Thiel. And they do kind of match the definition of what you're talking about with right Hegelians. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like both of them and a lot of right Hegelians interpret what Hegel said about the state, but misinterpret it. They seem to not understand, because when Alex Karp, well, just real quick, when Alex Karp and Peter Thiel talk about the state, they talk a lot in a lot of their speeches about Western culture and Western domination, and they seem to believe, possibly correctly, that the United States is the king regent of Western culture. It is the peak of Western society and the leader of it, and largely responsible for keeping it alive. And they almost see themselves, kind of going back to Lord of the Rings, as like knights in shining armor, like part of the Arthurian court, that they're the ones that are going to be the saviors of the sacred Western state.
They're the good elves.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. Peter Thiel's, he's one of the good billionaires. You know what I mean? One of the good ones.
One of my favorite details that I uncovered is that in Palantir's corporate culture, this isn't just Karp, this is the whole company. They call themselves hobbits, and they call their annual corporate retreat HobbitCon. And it's like that's how they self-identify. And it's like, do we know the same Lord of the Rings? Because in the Lord of the Rings I know, the hobbits are all about like smoking a little pipe, kicking back in a hammock, laying in the sun, growing carrots, swigging ale, just being harmless oafs, and just little furry creatures content with their peace in their gardens. It's like that's yeah, no, that's not you. That's not you crazy. If you help ICE. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's crazy the cognitive dissonance in this company, because yeah, you're completely right. Also, they have like 5 major like bases, all of which are named after, like, one's the Shire, one's Rivendell, and even the name itself. It's crazy that they associate themselves with hobbits, because the Palantir is like the seeing stone that Saruman uses. You know, Christopher Lee's character in the Lord of the Rings movies. They are Palantir is a pretty good association with what their entire company is. And it's not the good guys. It's not the fucking hobbits. It is quite literally the evil wizard pondering an orb on a gigantic tower, which is much closer to what Peter Thiel and Alex Karp are than jolly, wholesome hobbits.
Yeah, and I don't want to get blown off track too much. But yeah, I mean, when you brought up Hegel, really what it made me think about is, okay, 2 things. Number one, Hegel just is a statist. Like, again, I haven't read all of Hegel, but like philosophy, if you read Philosophy of Right, like he explicitly defends the right of states to like do torture and to imprison people without trials, and like he's very hot for it. He likes absolute sovereignty. He thinks it's great. His model of the most perfect, best state that's ever existed was Prussia, which was at one point called an army without a state. Like he loves the command and control. He loves the state. I don't think there's too much controversy about that. But Hegel is not a big influence on Peter Thiel. Who is a big influence on Peter Thiel is Ayn Rand. Peter Thiel reads Ayn Rand's books and is an instant convert. He gets to it in law school. And so he becomes an Ayn Randian capitalist, individualist, objectivist, full hook, line, and sinker, completely into all of Rand's ideas. And then Rand makes sense because Thiel has always been a money guy and quite popular with money guys. But one that's very strange is René Girard, who is this, to me and to my people that I know, a pretty obscure French psychoanalyst and theorist, and nonetheless had a huge influence on Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel did reading groups on Girard's work. He knew Girard, talked to him. Girard claimed to have mentored Peter Thiel. And I've read Violence in the Sacred, the René Girard book. And it has more written about incest than any book I have ever read. Literally over 100 paragraphs on the psychoanalytic theory of incest, as well as some extremely hackneyed interpretations of Greek tragedy that are basically just cherry-picked. And a book that at times makes an interesting point about mimetic violence and scapegoating and so on, but is another one of these like French theoretical works, like say that Foucault would make, where it's like a small handful of points that is just encapsulated in an absolute spaghetti of repetition, overstatement, hyperbole, and just outright cherry picking to fit your theory. So I don't know how he gets a hold of René Girard, but the big conclusion that he gets from Girard is that desire is mimetic. That we want things because other people want them. The more we see other people wanting things, the more we want it. And we have a society of mimesis. We're all just copying each other. We're just like little ants in the hive. And number two, when society starts to malfunction, we create a sacrificial victim and then we kill them. And that's how we as a society metabolize the violence that's pinballing around. So he takes what to me is a very dim view of human nature and society from René Girard. But those are the big influences on him, is The Lord of the Rings, Ayn Rand, and René Girard.
So, you go, Thomas.
I have nothing significant to say except that the Randian influence is like one of the least surprising things. Just to share an anecdote, I had a friend in high school who, even at 16, 17, he claims that the only book he'd ever read more than once was Atlas Shrugged. This guy,
Why?
Only child, rich family, this fucking kid, smart guy, but we would play Minecraft together and he would dictate what industries each people were allowed to partake in. Oh, you're going to be in the wood industry. You're going to be in the mining industry. And then he would use his admin powers and yell at you if you were trying to mine something when it was not your assigned industry. He would also play, he would cheat at board games. He would do, we would play Age of Mythology, and he would say, I'm playing the Atlanteans, the DLC overpowered faction. You can't attack me until 45 minutes into the game. By that point, he would, of course, have totally spiraled out of control, was unstoppable, and he would yell if you tried to attack him before that. If you didn't play by his rules, it would be a bad thing. And when you're describing this guy, I can only think of this kid that I knew in high school. I won't say his name because it just sounds like so spot on. The type of guy who's just like, this perspective of there is me and then there are the peons, right? And you know what I mean? I'm not a big moral theorist or anything like that, but I think when you live your life with the perspective that first of all, coming from a place of economic and social privilege. And second of all, from the perspective of there are great men in this world and I'm one of them, goddammit, it just leads you to genuinely do horrible things. Now, I'm not saying that this person is exactly the same as Peter Thiel, the subject of our discussion here. I'm just sharing an anecdote that happens to remind me a little bit, let's say.
Yeah. Well, all these major tech bros and venture capitalists that have a public persona, they're all the kid growing up, and we all experienced this, where they'd invite you over to a sleepover, and you'd be so stoked because they've got the PlayStation 2 and you don't. So you go over there, and they're like, let's play Jack and Daxter, and you're like, yes, I don't even have this. It's going to be great. And then you sit there, and they make you watch them play for 8 hours straight, and they never evolved beyond that point. They have the most intellectually mediocre people just have these massive delusions where they are the main character. But to get us back on track, Will, there was something I wanted to hear you talk about. So Palantir really hits its stride from what I've read early on the second Gulf War, or at least early to middle section of it, where they end up gaining some popularity with the government because they really invest in software to locate improvised explosive devices. And they do it somewhat effectively, which kind of begins their sincere relationship with the government. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Sure, I will. I'm scrolling through my notes.
You believe this nerd?
Yeah, damn.
Fucking showing up to a podcast prepared.
Showing up to the gunfight with no ammunition. Damn. I thought you were a sharpshooter.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I just in this 8-page document, I don't have an explicit timeline of Palantir, but it's fine. Whatever. Okay, so yes, Richard, basically that's correct. So the Army had a system for battlefield communications, and it was some old clunky shit that was made by like Raytheon, and it was this that Palantir wanted to replace. And so they started a practice, which they maintain to this day, which is very odd and probably close to unique, where they have what are called forward deployed engineers. And these are software guys that basically embed with the military, or embed with police departments, or embed with ICE. And their job is to basically see what these guys are using as far as databases are concerned. Palantir is a database company. They're a company that makes database products and makes dashboards or visualization tools for those databases. That's it. That is really all they do. And so what they wanted to make during the Iraq War was a newer, faster system, both for the military, the Army specifically was the contract that they wanted to bid on, and they also wanted to make an intelligence product for the CIA. That was one of their earliest projects, was to replace something that the CIA was using called Analyst's Notebook, which was like a British piece of software that was used to comb through metadata and case files and cross-reference people. And what was funny about the attempt to get the CIA and the Army as customers is that when the CIA and the Army tested Palantir's core product, 94% of people in both cases said this is worse than what we have now, and we do not want this technology. It's too complicated, it's too expensive, there's not enough value gained from having to relearn this. But in each case, both with the CIA and with the Army, there was a small handful of people who really were convinced that Palantir's technology would be useful for keeping units in communication with each other. The much more aggressive Army units in Iraq were more in favor of Palantir because it sped up their targeting of different houses with doors to kick in the middle of the night. That was one of the major use cases, as well as marking, as you said, IEDs on a map to try and find a pattern or whatever. But one thing that is consistent if you read both the book about Alex Karp and about Palantir, which just came out, which is called... okay, I can't remember. But there's a book that just came out, which is a biography of Alex Karp, which has the most detailed corporate history of Palantir. At any rate, it's not that effective. And one thing Palantir does throughout their corporate history is they massively overstate how crucial their product was to some military or law enforcement mission. For instance, they have subtly tried to claim credit for finding Osama bin Laden. And there are lots of people at the CIA and at the State Department and the military who say Palantir was absolutely not required for finding Osama bin Laden. But Alex Karp has this like coquettish thing he'll do where someone will bring up some credulous flack, will say in a Q&A session, I've heard you guys were involved with finding bin Laden. Is that true? And he'll just go, well, I'm not allowed to talk about it, but, we do find people with this software and kill them, so,
I just imagine him rolling his eyes and crossing his legs while he says that.
Yeah, I imagine him putting his little fingers to his cheeks and, looking up at the sky cutely, being like, well, maybe. No,
Did I do that?
The book you're thinking of, is it The Philosopher in the Valley? Is that the one?
The Philosopher in the Valley, yes.
Right,
yeah.
Cool. Mm-hmm. We'll plug it.
Yeah, it's that book got firebombed by 1-star reviews from all the Palantir fanboys, which to me was hilarious because I critiqued it from the opposite direction. All the carpet bombing of 1-star reviews on Amazon is from people who are like, this guy's just trying to do a character assassination on Alex Karp. You know, this guy's unfair, liberal bias, whatever. I'm like, this guy's soft as fuck. This guy is following this guy around like a lost puppy. He's got stars in his eyes. He only reluctantly at the end of the book comes to the conclusion that Karp has basically sold out all of his so-called progressive values. I mean, the life of Alex Karp, which I don't even think we're going to get to in this episode, but the life of Alex Karp is riddled with more intellectual contradictions than anyone I've ever studied. And I'm the history of philosophy guy, but I've never seen someone whose beliefs and life and work so violently crisscross and contradict themselves. Thomas?
Well, and just sort of to move it along here, I mean, when we were talking about Thiel and Alex Karp, I mean, so we can kind of, you just gave us the sort of summary of like how they got their start in the Second Gulf War and how they really became popular. But like, what has Palantir done since then? Like, what is Thiel's involvement then been in that time frame?
Well, Thiel's the chairman. Alex Karp is the CEO. And so it's mostly been Karp driving the ship. Thiel is basically there to remind them every couple of years that they're burning millions of dollars in a giant incinerator and that at some point they're going to have to actually make money, which, as I said earlier, took them 17 years. Which I think has got to be a record for a major U.S. corporation that like has a public offering and so forth. Like, I've never heard of a major startup that has taken 17 years to post a profitable quarter.
Much less
Uber
a military contractor, right?
Like, yeah, people that are getting the easy money, you know, where you're basically getting no bid contracts for dog shit software, which is what happened. So. Both the CIA and the Army concluded that they didn't want Palantir. There were a small handful of ideologues within the CIA and within the Army that said, no, we must have this, you know, whatever. And one of the craziest things that people say is that, you know, not buying Palantir, you know, we're putting American service members at risk. And somebody, I think a congressman or somebody in the House Armed Services Committee said this to like a 3-star general, and he got so angry he just started yelling. You know, because it's like saying that us not wanting your dog shit software is making people die in Iraq is such a crazy thing for someone in Peter Thiel or Alex Karp's position to say. So. The way they reacted to it was pretty funny. So they found out that in the mid-2000s, like 2007, 2008, that the Army did not want their shit and that they were going to exclude them from the next round of corporate bidding. And so they reacted in the only sensible way that you can react when you have a customer that just doesn't like your product, which is they sued them for not buying it. Palantir sued the U.S. Army for unlawfully discriminating against their corporation by not allowing them to bid on this contract. And the Army settled the lawsuit, and then they allowed Palantir to bid, and then they bought it in 2008 or 2009. To sue your biggest customer for not buying your stuff is quite an insane tactic for people that are in a relationship-based industry like the military-industrial complex.
Why do you think the Army settled as opposed to just fighting it?
I think that they didn't have the lawyers, or maybe they really had violated some absolutely obscure rule of government sourcing. again, the details for that are in the Philosopher in the Valley book, where you can get the blow by blow there. But that's what happened. The army didn't want their shit, so they sued the army for not buying it, and then the army eventually capitulated and bought their shit. And even though they got this huge ass army contract, they were still an incinerator burning millions of dollars. You know, they're still not profitable. I mean,
it's like mind-boggling, though. I mean, I guess it's like, then why does the army go around and reverse course, right? What do they say? Well, now that you've sued us and won and we've settled with you, and now that you can bid on it, well, now we actually want it, right? I mean, it's like, listen, you know, say what you will about military-industrial complex, and of course we do, but, you know, fundamentally, it's like, from my perspective, it's like, if you're a contractor and for whatever reason you're not in the good graces of the military, it's like, you're not getting that contract. It doesn't matter if it's, you know what I mean? To some extent, it doesn't matter. But then, so like, what's the secret sauce with Palantir? It's so, it is a little baffling.
The secret sauce, there are basically only two things. And the two things that Palantir has going for it is, number one, they have relationships with government. The Thiel network, the Thiel verse, the connection with all these super hawks and with all these CIA guys. I mean, this company was explicitly started by the deep state. And if you read the Contrarian, it will talk about how Thiel is connected to generals, high-level CIA guys, DOD people of various kinds, Homeland Security types. Because basically, after 9/11, with the whole eBay PayPal thing, Peter Thiel had a shitload of money. And of course, he would like to also get more money, but mostly what he craved is meaning, power. You know, I want to do something that matters. You know, he develops this critique of all these other startups that apps are stupid, social networks are stupid, software companies are stupid. You know, like, I wanted flying cars and all I got was, you know, Twitter. And so he's like, no, we should go back to like building stuff. And we should do something really sick, like building SQL databases that prevent terrorism, right? And that was Palantir's pitch to, you know, ambitious college undergraduates or software engineers. Is like, hey, do you want to build software that catches terrorists? And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that sounds good. That sounds good at a cocktail party. What do you do? Oh, I work on this software that tracks terrorists, you know, like, we're trying to prevent the next 9/11. You're like, wow, that's hardcore. You're like, there's guys over there that are just trying to make, like, you know, stupid blogging websites and apps that keep track of your bookmarks for you or whatever. But you're trying to catch bin Laden. That's crazy. And so that was a big part of the brand. But I mean, one thing that is just clear is that as a business, I mean, forget all the moral and political complexity for a second. Just as a machine that's supposed to make money, Palantir is one of the worst fuck-ups I've ever seen. I mean, they just took L after L after L after L. They had to settle a racial discrimination lawsuit. There was something called the Thiel tool, which was supposed to replace the Bloomberg terminal for financial data that they spent a shitload of money on and then abandoned. They had a piece of business software called Metropolis, which was designed for like banks and insurance companies. So they gave that software away for free to Chase. And what immediately happened was that the security guy inside of the bank, who basically took charge of installing and using the software, used it to spy on all of the other employees in the bank, including the CEO. And so that triggered a major shit fit. Most business types who analyzed the company said that this isn't a software company, this is a consultancy, because you basically create a new product for every company. Like, the Army does not want the same thing that the CIA and Bank of America and Home Depot and the New York Police Department make. And so what they were really doing is they were paying humongous salaries to super talented database engineers and software developers. And then they were pushing those guys to customize software for law enforcement, border patrol, the military, the CIA, large financial institutions, corporations. But again, like if you look at their corporate sales, like Home Depot, they bought their product. They immediately concluded that it wasn't any good, wasn't worth it, so they got rid of it. They gave their product away for free to the New Orleans Police Department, and immediately started using it for predictive policing and racially discriminating against black people. And there was a shitstorm, and they got rid of it. They gave it to the NYPD and the LAPD for free, and there was another shitstorm, and they got rid of it. And again, they were supposed to sell to Oracle in 2016, but they overvalued the company and the deal fell apart. Like, just L after L after L. I can't stress enough that this is not how you run a fucking business. And we haven't even gotten to the personality of Alex Karp and how weird and impractical he is. So, yeah.
So, Will, I have a question. So, for the benefit of our audience, I think some of our audience, not all of them, but some of them, may be wondering, okay, Richard, Will, Thomas, you've talked about the mistakes that Palantir has made. You talked about how they kind of came up during the Second Gulf War. You talked about all these interactions they had with businesses in the early 2010s. But at the end of the day, how should I feel about them if I don't know anything about them? What is wrong with Palantir? Because I think anybody can discern that we don't like Palantir. And I want to start in a specific place. So ICE is a hot topic nowadays. They are very aggressive. They're getting increasingly well-funded. And they are, they're attacking immigrants and arresting them during the green card process. And they're also, the Department of Homeland Security is also starting to grow more aggressive. So in the modern day, can you tell us about Palantir's relationship with ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, and also Immigration OS, one of the software they released?
Yeah, so the books run out of steam before the second Trump administration, historically. Like, Palantir is one kind of company, let's say until 2024. But now from 2024 on, I mean, they're just a juggernaut. I mean, they've had humongous stock price increase on Wall Street. The Trump administration has gift wrapped them a no-bid government contract to build a government database on every American. And again, like, this is part of the never-ending contradiction. It's like Peter Thiel, civil libertarian, critic of the state, is totally thrilled to make a company that builds a database on every citizen. So there's no end to those sorts of contradictions. But today, Palantir, as you said, is used by ICE to find immigrants and kidnap them and deport them. It's used by Border Patrol as part of the effort to surveil the southern border, as is probably one of Palantir's most consequential things is that it spawned the company Anduril, which is a major defense contractor now and is especially well positioned in the market to make surveillance drones, like small scale ones that can be used by like teams at the southern border for surveillance and deterrence, like with weapons. So there's the work that Palantir does for the southern border patrol. There's work that they do for ICE. All of it, reinforcing Trump's fascist agenda to, as he said, stop the vermin who are poisoning our blood. And so. Yeah, so Palantir's involved in that. They're a military contractor, the Army, the Marines. They're very heavily integrated into the Department of Defense, and their software is used by the CIA. There was this movie, Mountainhead, that came out just like a year ago. And it was made by the same guy that made Billions, I think. So, or no, not Billions, Succession. Crap, I can't remember. Adam McKay? I don't know. Whatever. The point is, there's a funny movie called Mountainhead where they satirize, like, if Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, and Sam Altman all got into a hot tub with each other while they were at a mountain resort and discussed the meaning of life, how it would sound. And there's a character in there played by Steve Carroll that basically is a direct stand-in for either Peter Thiel or Mark Andreessen. And, one thing that they say when they are trying to, like, literally crash the world's governments is the Peter Thiel character says, I'm so integrated into everything that if I pulled the plug right now, the DoD wouldn't be able to get email, right? Or, the traffic lights would turn off. At one point, they order a rolling brownout in Europe, and it happens. And, it's a little bit far-fetched, I suppose, but Palantir is deeply integrated with the parts of the U.S. government that surveils its own citizens. And with the privacy breach that happened with Doge and Elon Musk, and how they basically came in and vacuumed out, government records, and now this contract I see it not so much as an increase in government surveillance, because the government's always had total surveillance. It's NSA, Snowden, but it is now very much corporatized. Now even the private sector has this kind of absolute surveillance power, and so that's very scary to me.
God, I just want to cry right now.
Yeah, this has really been a thrill. This has really been just a good feel episode, where it's like we're all laughing, having fun, but no, unfortunately not. We have to contend with the real world.
Now, I want to be clear about something. Like, I'm not afraid of Palantir, and I'm not afraid of their dogshit software either. What I am afraid of is what Palantir's story in the United States proves, and what the ideologies of these people are, and how it's resonating with people in power. Like, what's terrifying to me, and the question that I asked so much is, okay, given that Palantir was for 17 years a glowing incinerator of money, who exactly has enough money to keep this dumpster fire of a company whose basic promise is to spy on the world on behalf of spooks, military, and government? Who has the money to keep this fire lit for 17 fucking years? Yeah, Thomas?
Is it a civil libertarian?
Yeah, exactly. It's someone that believes that, the government which governs best governs least, and so on. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad. That's awesome. I love small government. I like when there's no invasion of my personal and private life, by the forces that be, right? And I love it when those are the same people, who really promote that, multi-billionaires, that sort of thing. I love it when they're the ones with the keys to the kingdom, because I feel like I can really trust them, right? You know what I mean? I can trust those people to not, maliciously, surveil and control me. It's good. It's great.
It's crazy, kind of bouncing off that. It's crazy, all sarcasm aside, that I remember watching this interview with Karp, where he talks about how his ultimate goal is to unify every department of the government with the same information software. So everybody's on the same page. So everybody has all the same information. And it's really odd thinking about how the timeline of Doge getting created, Elon Musk, leaking all of our information, listener, your information too, all of it,
if you're American,
all over the United States.
To be clear,
if you're American, maybe even outside of that.
Sure.
And leaking all of that, and then Palantir coming in to use that to realize their vision of this one information network that not only our government, but private corporations are attached to. Now, obviously, I wouldn't say anything fraudulent, or I wouldn't lie and say something like it's a plan that maybe different interest groups are interacting with and collaborating on. I also wouldn't say things like maybe all billionaires are evil and have a master plan for becoming our overlords. But Will, what's your thoughts? Do you think there's a unity amongst these weirdos?
I think that there's a center of gravity for sure. Peter Thiel represents the kind of extreme right wing of Silicon Valley, and even of the money people. Peter Thiel's views are, I don't think, anywhere near the majority view in the Valley. For example, when Peter Thiel was an undergraduate at Stanford, he had a conversation with a classmate of his, who is a black woman, incidentally, about whether apartheid in South Africa, which still existed at the time, was justifiable. And Peter Thiel told her to her face that from an economic point of view, apartheid was perfectly justified and the moral issues were irrelevant.
It's a really popular thing to say to, someone of African descent.
It's
right?
also really easy to say when you are from the demographic that benefited from it. Like, I wonder how many, I know how many South African Africans were looking at that system and saying, well, the economics justify it. And the answer is 0 of them.
I mean, what amazes me is that Elon Musk also comes from apartheid South Africa and from mining specifically. And it's like these two guys, Elon and Thiel, who don't like each other, by the way. Not that it matters. I mean, they have the same interests ultimately. But these guys have basically crawled out of a mine in South Africa and, a rough beast slouching towards America to be born again. And it is scary. And I think that Thiel bothers me so much because rather than just doing a respectable rich guy thing and just, putting money into different companies and, flying around the world, he's profoundly involved in politics. He volunteered to be a delegate for Donald Trump at the 2016 Republican National Convention. So he was a very early Trumper, which alienated him from a lot of his peers. He was on the executive committee of Trump's presidential transition team, and he named a bunch of people who ultimately ended up in Trump's, administration. He hosted a tech industry summit for Trump in 2016. He funded Ron Paul and Carly Fiorina. He originally wanted Fiorina to be the winner of the Republican presidency. It was first Fiorina that he wanted, then Cruz, and then finally he got behind Trump. So Thiel is also a big part of the reason why Facebook was able to skew the election in 2016 so heavily in Donald Trump's favor. Basically what happened is that there was a deluge of bullshit far-right stories that got lots of engagement on Facebook and became, extremely influential through people who were getting their news from Facebook in 2016, to the point where people inside of Facebook called it the Facebook election. And there's been a lot written about this. One of the interesting tidbits is the most viewed Facebook news story during the period of the 2016 election campaign is a news story whose headline is Pope Francis shocks the world, endorses Donald Trump. That story got more eyeballs on Facebook than any other story at the time. So just a blatantly false story. And so what Facebook did is, this is back when Mark Zuckerberg, who's basically just a political centrist, he saw this deluge of bullshit from Breitbart and so on, and he changed the way that the news feed worked to just go back to showing news from BBC, CBS, ABC, whatever. And what happened was he got screamed at by everyone who was a right-wing pundit: Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, American Heritage and American Enterprise Institute guys. And so Peter Thiel, who, remember, was the first big investor in Facebook and a mentor to Mark Zuckerberg, said, you know what? I'll arrange a meeting between you, Mark, and all of these right-wing guys who want to yell at you. And so he did. He made a meeting where Glenn Beck and Mark Zuckerberg and guys from the Heritage Foundation sat down and talked about how Silicon Valley's got such a left-wing, bias. And the net effect of that meeting was that Zuckerberg took down those bullshit detectors. And that stuff was back in force.
So be a fly on the wall. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's really. And this is all in the book, The Contrarian, by Chafkin, which, again, that's the one you should read if you're going to read one. But nonetheless, so if it's true that Facebook swung the election to Donald Trump by dint of serving bullshit paid for political stories, political ads that were served directly to Facebook and so on. If that's true, the reason why it happened is because Peter Thiel organized a bunch of right-wing guys to go and yell at Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, the shit never ends. It just goes on forever like this.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good kind of, it's one of those like instances in a bottle, right? Where you can just kind of look at it under a microscope and extrapolate to a macro perspective of like, this is kind of influence people like this in general, but specifically what Peter Thiel does, it's what they do, right? It's like, and so you can look at this specific instance of setting up these meetings, right? And of influencing people that you're influencing the people around you, you by way of them have the control over whatever it is that they're doing, or at least high degrees of influence to facilitate your own political ends, right? I mean, it's one of those, I guess if it was a government, you would call it like soft power projection, right? Where it's like, it's the vested economic interest, right? Which grants you control over a thing, right? And so, yeah, I mean, when you've got people like Peter Thiel who have this soft power over huge swaths of, industry and the media, it's not, I don't think it's good. I mean, I obviously not a pro Thiel type, right? But it's just, to me, this is kind of the key takeaway where it's like, these are the people and this is the power, right? This is the guy and this is what he can do and this is what he has done. But speaking of what he has done and, media influence and that sort of thing, Will, you had mentioned at the top of the episode that this gentleman, Mr. Thiel, was responsible
Peter,
for
if you're listening.
Oh, yeah. If you're listening, nothing but love, buddy. Yeah, if you want to invest in my startup, find me on my web zone, all right?
Yeah, Peter Thiel, you're the man.
Yeah.
If this is the 1 second excerpt of this podcast you listen to, you rock. Don't listen to the rest. It's only compliments.
I need your
Dude,
money.
I loved Atlas Shrugged. Let's talk about it sometime.
I'll be a tool on your Swiss Army knife of multi-million and billionaires. Why not?
Yeah, I mean, he funded Curtis Yarvin. Why not?
I'll be a Thiel.
Yeah. Talk about also pumping blood into a corpse. Yarvin, this blogger that just spun spider webs in the far corners of the internet, arguing for things like bringing back slavery. Where does he get his money? Where does he get invited to the cool parties? Yeah, Peter Thiel once again. So
that could be us. It's all I'm saying.
Another fact I must blurt out is J.D. Vance, who will become president if there's a Big Mac too many in Trump's life. J.D. Vance is a creature of Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel spent more money on J.D. Vance's initial run for Senate, his Senate campaign, than anyone has ever spent on any political campaign for any candidate ever.
The couch budget must have been astronomical. They have to keep replacing them. But
do you know how many couches they had to settle in court with?
So again, you're right. Right. It's like, I just wish this guy would stop fucking with politics, you know?
And that sort of was where I was going with this. And like you said at the top of the episode, that this that Peter Thiel was the person responsible for taking down a multi-million-dollar media conglomerate. Would you care to talk about that a little bit while we're on the subject of media influence?
Oh, yeah, I can't remember how much we were rolling for talking about that. But yes, one thing that people should know, and there's a book by Ryan Holiday about this called Conspiracy, and it also gets talked about in the book The Contrarian, is that Peter Thiel had a bit of a sour taste in his mouth after this now defunct media outlet called Gawker ran a series of stories about him that were not even strictly negative. For example, Gawker ran a story called Peter Thiel is Definitely Gay, Guys. And this story, if you read the verbiage on it, is not in any way homophobic or shaming Thiel for being gay, nor is it an attempt to out somebody who is in the closet. Thiel was very openly dating men in Silicon Valley, and nobody who had any familiarity with him would have not known that he was gay at the time. But what Gawker was also doing, and I bring up the Peter Thiel is definitely gay article, because this is the excuse Peter Thiel is going to use to hatch a 10-year-long conspiracy to legally drive them out of existence, which is what ultimately happens.
I'm ready for it. Hit me.
Yeah, so what happens is Gawker also runs a series of articles that basically just show Thiel to be kind of weird and creepy and ineffective. And they run articles about how he's investing in crank life extension and anti-aging Silicon Valley health institutes, how he is funding this really weird guy who wants to run the Seasteading Initiative. The Seasteading Initiative, for those who don't know, is where you try and create Bioshock in real life by creating cities in the middle of the ocean in international waters that are made out of these floating platforms, which you can, like, you know, in their imagination, if you want to merge with another seastead nation, you can just, like, dock your bark. And
Thiel doesn't get any more Andrew Ryan. It's incredible. Like, you know what I mean? The parallels are shocking. Randian influences, free market societies in the middle of the ocean. I mean, you can't make it up.
No,
right?
I mean, like every time I've talked about the seasteading thing, I've just said to people, have you ever played the game Bioshock? Because he is literally building Rapture. Like, another
Fucking
detail is
man.
like one thing that Peter Thiel, in terms of an investment thesis, like what he likes to put money into, one of the things is like cutting edge biomedical research. So like just put it together, right? You've got a guy building who's an Ayn Rand influence. He's trying to build cities in the middle of the ocean, escape from taxes, escape from government regulations, funding for biomedical advanced technology, and living without any kind of law. And it's like, it's as literally close. If he had just played Bioshock, he would know what happens. So I think
maybe
that
he has,
we should start.
and maybe he likes it anyway.
Yeah, maybe he loved
wow,
all of that stuff.
They really nailed it. God, I want.
Yeah,
he's the kind of guy to play Bioshock and be like, wow, this is a great fucking idea. Why didn't anyone actually done this?
They just messed it up because they're not as smart as I am.
Yeah,
I'll do it right this time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the utter lack of self-awareness or irony that people like this have. I mean, you know, it's the typical like midwit reaction to looking at a mirror.
Yeah, my favorite phrase for this is "this time will be different."
This time will be different. Yeah,
and, yeah.
My favorite phase is the "Fell for it again" award.
Did he walk into that meeting with Mark Zuckerberg and say, "Would you kindly post more right-wing schlock on your platform, please?"
Yeah. So anyway, getting back to the Gawker story. So Gawker writes articles about how Peter Thiel is playing Bioshock in real life, and he sees this as hurting the brand. And he has a little bit of a personal rivalry or a shit fit with the editor at Gawker. And so he decides that he is going to pursue legal action. But he doesn't have much of a case. His initial case is built around the saying that he was outed and that his conservative parents will be upset to find out that he was gay. In isolation, that fact probably is true. But nonetheless, Gawker did not out Peter Thiel as gay. Peter Thiel was openly gay. What he really wanted revenge for was souring his reputation. And so he said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to covertly fund a ginormous class action lawsuit against Gawker, where I find every single person that Gawker has ever pissed off, and I will pay their legal fees. I will set up shell corporations to hire lawyers for them, and I will just flow money to anybody who wants to sue Gawker for libel, defamation, anything. And they assemble like a dozen people who have more or less credible grievances against Gawker for something. But by far the most memorable is the Hulk Hogan sex tape. So Hulk Hogan was caught on tape having sex with the wife of a Florida radio DJ named Bubba the Love Sponge. This is because Bubba the Love Sponge.
That name rocks, by the way.
Me. Sorry.
This is
Continue.
real.
Bubba the Love Sponge. Let's go.
So, Bubba the Love Sponge invites the Hulkster to fuck his wife in a four-corner bed, and Hulk Hogan agrees. What Hulk Hogan does not know is that Bubba the Love Sponge, for his personal enjoyment, has positioned a hidden camera and has recorded the whole thing. I don't know exactly what happens next. I'm guessing few do. But through one way or another, that sex tape ends up in the hands of Gawker. And they publish, I think, a 30-second clip of Hulk Hogan having sex. And Hulk Hogan sues them for invasion of privacy. And they ultimately win. And the court orders Gawker to pay Hulk Hogan $140 million. To think about this sum of money, I asked myself, what is the median lifetime earning of the average American? It turns out it's about $1.8 million. So Gawker, for the crime of putting 30 seconds of Hulk Hogan having sex on the internet, was forced to pay 70 people's lives worth of money to Hulk Hogan.
Jesus.
It's a fun metric.
They were fucked. They tried to fight it in an appeal, but they broke, and they had to file for bankruptcy, and Gawker was dissolved. End of story. It took 10 years for this conspiracy to bear fruit, but it did. Peter Thiel, by funding all of these various lawsuits, which would not have proceeded without him, finally hit on one that was like, blowing up the Death Star. And I one thing that I was doing while these two were playing Space Marines is I was just double checking an assumption that I had made. So I was prompting the AI, I was prompting, because it has very exhaustive search capacities. I said, is there a historical precedent for a high net worth individual suing a medium to large size news outlet out of existence for entirely personal reasons? And they're like, yeah, you have to go back to the 1830s or 1840s to see examples of that.
It's always a fun response to get.
Yeah. Like there were cases where people tried during the Gilded Age. And, there were plenty of times when high net worth individuals sued people for libel and took a chunk out of them. But to actually fully destroy a newspaper was, I think, actually a unique event in American history. For one person to sue an organization of that size into oblivion had never happened before. And Peter Thiel, who claims to be a free speech absolutist, it's kind of similar to Elon Musk, says that funding Hulk Hogan's $140 million case against Gawker is the most philanthropic thing I've ever done.
You know who Peter Thiel reminds me of? And Will, I feel like Will and Thomas will probably be familiar with him. If I were to, and this is a crazy stretch, compare these people to Nazis. I know, nuts. Peter Thiel reminds me of Ernst Röhm. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. He reminds me of Ernst Röhm,
yes.
so, including the homosexuality aspect, which no judgment on that. There's nothing wrong with that part of him, but we'll talk about that a little bit. Talk about Ernst Röhm.
Well, Ernst Röhm was the leader of the Brown Shirts, the SA, and he was in control of basically a private army of street toughs that terrorized especially left-wing Germans during the late 20s and the early 1930s. And what happened was they were useful up until a point. But after Hitler became chancellor in 1933, there was a rivalry that formed between the SA, which was basically, beer swelling football hooligans who were only vaguely indoctrinated, or they were Stahlhelm type guys who were left over from the disgruntled veterans of World War I and stuff like that. But anyway, you had this organization. It was huge. I can't remember the numbers. It was like 250,000 people or something were in the SA.
Hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, massive organization. Ernst Röhm was the head of it. And Hitler and Goebbels and everyone in the Nazi high command, they knew that Ernst Röhm was gay. And that the top crust of the leadership of the SA was gay. And a rivalry developed between Heinrich Himmler's SS, which was like the much more serious, straight-faced form of Nazi elite rule, as opposed to the, kind of useful, violent blockheads of the SA. So this rivalry forms between Himmler and Röhm, and Himmler eventually convinces Hitler that Ernst Röhm is plotting to overthrow him. And after all, he's got the manpower to do it. And so they start leaking more and more stories to, well, at that point, Joseph Goebbels' press about how Ernst Röhm is gay. And then eventually it culminates in a conspiracy that Hitler orders to decapitate the leadership of the SA called the Night of the Long Knives, where SS guys and other people acting at Hitler's orders lure the SA leadership to this resort town, and basically they capture all of them while they're like getting drunk in a bathhouse. And Ernst Röhm is shot by an SS officer like 2 days later. And by the way, Night of the Long Knives, 1488, was what we found Milo Yiannopoulos' password to be on his computer.
That is so ironic. Well, to be fair, unlike Ernst Röhm, it turns out, by his own words, Milo Yiannopoulos is not a homosexual.
Yeah, that's kind of slanderous of you to say, actually. Like,
yeah, cool it. He had unwanted same-sex attraction, not the same thing.
Not the same thing.
Not the same thing, but I do have a question for you, Will. Do you think that there is any situation, because I think that we've done a decent job of establishing the length of the power that Peter Thiel and Palantir has. Do you think that there's a possibility in the future of the powers that be, everybody, the CIA, ICE, Department of Homeland Security, the Trump administration, and the unfortunately possible J.D. Vance future administration, do you think there's a chance of them turning on Peter Thiel like the SS and Heinrich Himmler turned on Rome or Rom?
God, I hope so. But no, it's impossible for me to envision anything happening with Thiel except that he digs in even further and becomes more fully entrenched in the deep state. What makes him different is that he is ruthless, intelligent. He is well positioned in the nexus point between the money people, the intelligence people, and the political people, and the DoD people. He exists at this kind of crossing point where people that are interested in elite rule of one kind or another can all converge. I mean, why is Peter Thiel bankrolling Curtis Yarvin? You know, why has he been putting forward this guy onto the internet and now into positions of major prominence where he has one of the most well-read Substacks in the world and he's doing high-profile events and so on? It's like, how is it possible that a guy who is openly in favor of a monarchy, who says that his greatest intellectual influence is Carl Schmitt, the guy who was Hitler's pet philosopher, and invented the Führerprinzip, which is the legal doctrine that Hitler, because he is here's the right Hegelian thing, Hitler, because he is in his own being the embodiment of the German spirit, whatever he does, regardless of what laws happen to be on the books, it is legal if Hitler does it, because whatever Hitler does is simply the German spirit acting through Hitler. And laws, therefore, form around that instead of containing it. So that's Carl Schmitt. who is Curtis Yarvin's greatest influence. So they're not even trying in any way, shape, or form to hide the Nazi connections or hide the connections to the Third Reich. They're very openly inspired by it. And so
I don't think they have to, because the average person doesn't recognize those connections or even care. The average person just being like most people that aren't reading, that aren't getting involved in philosophy and history, which is a massive number of Americans, not just your average. That's completely unattached to wealth as well. There are plenty of people that are incredibly intelligent scientists, that are incredibly intelligent businessmen who, when it comes to the liberal arts, history, philosophy, are either extremely uneducated or have no ability to grasp the implications of the history or philosophy they're reading.
Yeah, Thomas, go for it.
I mean, listen, I have the Peter Thiel Wikipedia page open right now, and I just feel like this quote perfectly encapsulates kind of what we're talking about, right? So in the book called The Straussian Moment, Thiel notes that, quote, since 1920, the vast increase in welfare beneficiaries and the extension of the franchise to women, two constituencies that are notoriously tough for libertarians, have rendered the notion of capitalist democracy into an oxymoron. He, of course, then goes on to claim that it's a commonplace statistical observation about voting patterns that is often called the gender gap. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's not it's not an accident that people like Yarvin are being bankrolled by guys who hold these sorts of beliefs. I mean, like, and when a person like this exists in such a, like you said, Will, a nexus of power, and they have this long arm, and this is what they think. I mean, like, if any listener really wants to truly consider, I mean, the magnitude of what we're talking about, it's like, just think about the implications of someone holding these beliefs with the power that he has. And that's it. He doesn't need to be elected to any political office. He doesn't need to do whatever. He just needs to be who he is, and he can accomplish the things he wants to accomplish. So when you're looking at the world and say, oh my God, how horrible it is to live in the modern day, there are architects, right? They exist. And not everything that happens these days is by accident.
Agreed.
No, all of the bad things that are happening is because of Greta Thunberg, who is the real Antichrist.
God, you're so real for that one. Finally, we can get to the real bad role model of the episode, Greta Thunberg, something.
I don't think there's many. Yeah, I don't think there's many people in the audience who will have not heard about the Peter Thiel Antichrist interview. But just in case you haven't, I'm just going to put in a clip right here where he tells I think Wall Street Journal or Washington Post guy that he thinks Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist. So he thinks Greta Thunberg is the Antichrist. And what's so funny is that pretty much to the extent that anyone can objectively be like the Antichrist, I'm no Bible scholar, but, you know, a guy who builds surveillance technologies, a guy who funds military industrial companies, a guy who has immense political power, a guy who is trying to make an AI that can govern entire countries, if not the world, a guy who spends money on things like blood transfusions from young people to keep him alive longer, a guy who wants to build his own floating kingdom in the sea made out of, like, you know, oil rigs, and so on and so forth. I think if I had to choose someone who resembled the Antichrist, I would probably lean more in the direction of Peter Thiel.
But yeah, revelation.
I mean, Thomas, the quote you said about, you know, it comes from an essay that he wrote where he says that capitalism and democracy are incompatible, and that the worst thing that has happened to the world is giving women the right to vote. Later on, he clarifies that he's not in favor of taking away women's rights to vote, but it is undeniable that women voting has fucked everything up.
I mean, he had me in the first half, right? I mean, it's like, if you want to talk about the Hegelian influence, there you go. Look no fucking further, right?
It is crazy how common, especially with dudes like Nick Fuentes, And even more, like Pete Hegseth tweeted or retweeted something like this. There is a largely growing movement in the more extreme right wing of revoking a woman's right to vote. And it's funny, they'll never outright say that because that's just too corrosive. It's too unpopular. You can't just outright say that that's what you want, even though that is what you want as one of these people. So the way that they phrase it is, no. We would never revoke a woman's right to vote. What we believe in is the family unit voting. So every family gets one vote. But it also begs the question, okay, which member of the family is the one that turns in the vote? Because to them, they'll say, no, we're not taking a woman's right to vote. A family is going to collaborate and decide once they all talk, and then the husband's going to go and submit the vote. So it's the exact same thing. It is revoking a woman's right to vote, but it's this glossed over, prettier way of saying it.
I had never heard that. That's cracked as fuck. That's so crazy.
Yeah.
I mean,
and there are people high up in the government that just openly say that. It's not they're not even ashamed of thinking that way. They're so unashamed of it that they'll say it out loud. But I apologize, Thomas. I interrupted you.
And I mean, it just kind of is naturally too, right? When they say a family unit, I mean, to them, a natural quote unquote family unit obviously consists of a man, a woman, and 2.5 children, right? So, I mean, that opens the door, of course, to say, well, I mean, if you're in a legal homosexual living arrangement, you're technically not a family unit, so you don't get a vote. Oh, you're a single mother, single parent, you're orphaned and you have grandchildren, or you know what I mean, and you're living with your grandparents. It's like, well, and then we can specifically, it's like, well, we passed a law saying that only nuclear families can vote. Well, that means we can arbitrarily exclude nuclear family, other alternative family arrangements from voting at whether, I mean, basically on the basis of whether or not they're going to vote for us, like statistically.
Yeah. Well, and also you can start invalidating people based off their religion. You can start arguing against the validity of certain religions' marriages. For example, recently the capital E enemy, which there's a new one every week, has been Somalis, and they've been associating them a lot with Muslims, mostly because a lot of people in that demographic have been pushing back against Trump. But yeah, it's this whole idea of reevaluating who can vote based off of the family unit is a very easily manipulatable and a very dangerous idea. It's bad. It's not good.
Richard, have you taken your heritage trip to Wisconsin yet?
Am I taking my earth? Well, yeah. You know what? I did. I went to Wisconsin, and I made sure to bow down. I made sure to position myself where the local Culver's is to my east, and I bowed down and I did pray.
Good. Yeah. Showing proper respect for the Mecca of the Midwest.
Yeah. I have also made pilgrimage to my ancestral homelands, which is towns of 3-digit populations in south central Illinois. And yeah, I have tasted the corn of the people. I know where the corn is grown, folks. All right.
Will, are you claiming to be the avatar of the zeitgeist? Is that what you're saying?
No, I will say this one thing, which is, so back in college, I did my 23andMe because I was like, look, you can get your genome analyzed for like $100. This is very cool. So I got it analyzed, and the ancestry report came back, and I don't really care about my ancestry. Part of me has always wondered or wanted to know if I am actually a descendant of Friedrich Engels or if we were ever like in the same family, because I always thought that would have been pretty all right. But I got my ancestry report back, and I opened it, and it said 100% European, and I'm like, there's no way. But I've had it reanalyzed over the years, and yep, I am true facts, 100% white.
Well,
oh my God!
Congratulations, you're safe in Trump's America.
That means, yeah, I'm actually destined for the incinerator first because I am now a race traitor.
Right? Yeah. No, you're saying, your comment about not caring about your heritage. I mean, to me, that sounds like very typical far left race hatred. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also, Will, unfortunately, that does mean that you will be disqualified from the the Christmas Adventurers Club.
Yeah, I mean, oh, yeah. So Richard and I got to talk about one battle after another.
We can't talk too much because we should do a little mini episode later, but...
No, not now, but yeah, we will talk about it. Yeah, for the record, I'm mostly Dutch. That whole, like, Dutch-German border area is apparently where most of my DNA is from. Whatever, I'm inbred, it doesn't matter. But to kind of get
we're
back...
all Amerimuts here,
Yeah.
You know how it is.
Yeah, we're all burgers, we're all the same, equality, etc. We are all equally worthless on this godforsaken continent, this kingdom of death. Yep. So anyway, yeah, I think we're gonna wrap up there. There will have to be a part 2. There's so much to this story. It just goes on forever. I didn't get to talk much about Alex Karp, who is much fruitier and weirder even than Peter Thiel, and more contradictory. Thiel has been a relatively straightforward, like right-wing crank guy trying to throw influence and throw money around and basically, pull things towards the perspective of someone who believes white people are discriminated against in society, or someone who believes that, actually Christianity is under attack everywhere you look. The Christians are still persecuted all over the world today. And so, yeah, Thiel, I think I have exhausted what I need to say about Thiel. But the Karp story will be coming up in part 2 because it's even weirder.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm super excited.
Same as I am, because I think that's definitely going to be a lot of fun, especially now we've laid a lot of the groundwork and can get into the nitty gritty. But with that, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you, fellas. Now, audience, before you go, don't forget to follow us on Spotify, follow us on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, give us a like, subscribe, comment, all that sort of thing. We would love to hear your thoughts. And if you feel so inclined, donate to our Patreon. And we would be very eternally grateful for you to do that. Peter Thiel, if you're listening, you too can be a Patreon donator, and we'll say whatever you want us to say.
What Thomas is saying is that we are all poor as fucking can be bought.
Yes, we can be bought. Give us money. Okay,
that's not true.
That's the plug. No, we're stalwart defenders of
join the
liberty,
Patreon,
justice,
support
equality.
our inevitable future legal defense.
The Patreon, of course, being Hemlock.
Hemlock
Patreon. Thank you very much.
Okay, you can edit it there.